Okay, everyone, it is 8:30 p.m. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. A couple quick announcements. This is really important. Hopefully you guys are part of our Facebook page, Conscious Contact Group on Facebook. We have a New Year's Eve celebration every 7 years. New Year's Eve falls on a Saturday. We'll be in here. We'll have open mic from 7 p.m. to 8, meaning that 12 people for 5 minutes, and then we have this amazing lineup of speakers coming in, Robbie W. and Chris S., a couple other different ones. We'll be doing that, and we'll be here for New Year's Eve. Tons of food. It's all free. It'll be a lot of fun. We always need chairpersons. If you'd like to sign up and be a chairperson here, we need greeters. There's a lot of service to be done at this meeting normally. And what else have I got? I'm always forgetting something. But anyway, there's tons of food. Come early, stay late, stay after the meeting. And George is going to be our chairperson tonight. Let's welcome him in.
Glasses. I get some glasses. Here they are. How you doing? Thanks, Ron. Welcome to Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Jared Galster, and I'm Jared G., and I'm an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street in Doylestown. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m. and speaker at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30. Right here, please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and the service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. If there's anyone new or from out of town, they would like to introduce themselves with their first name. That would be now. Anyone?
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Amy. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Stacy. Welcome.
I'm Jeff. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Jeff. Welcome.
Michelle, an alcoholic.
Hey, Michelle.
I'm Teresa. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Teresa.
I'm Fox. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Fox. Good to see you, buddy. Anybody else?
Jess, an alcoholic.
Hey, Jess. Welcome. Anyone else? Thank you. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with a working knowledge of the 12 steps and willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? Our sister group is a big book study meeting that meets every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. just up the street at the Salem UCC Church, 186 Court Street, Doylestown. Coffee is on at 6 p.m. We have a meeting list and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Group Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of the big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put the donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD donations. All CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, and our Facebook group. Subscribe and share. You can find our speakers there. Join our Facebook page and keep informed and share upcoming events and meetings. Okay, and I welcome Gabby to read the AA preamble. Gabby.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I'm an alcoholic. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Okay. And I'm going to invite Steve up to read the 12 steps.
Hi, Steve, alcoholic. Hi, everybody. 12 steps of AA. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And now I introduce Jared's going to come back and finish it up.
Okay. No smoking on the church property. Please take a moment of silence to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now I introduce Dave M. as the speaker. Come on, Dave.
How's everybody doing? My name's Dave. I'm an alcoholic. I really don't do good with the whole microphone thing, so if I just step away and start screaming, you guys will understand why. My sobriety date is April 23rd of 2004. I have a sponsor. He's aware that he's my sponsor. I'm pretty certain that on some days he probably wishes he wasn't my sponsor. And I kind of have two home groups. One is the Thursday night meeting that meets right around the corner, Thursday at 7:30, the Big Book Study Solution Group. However, due to life circumstances, a couple times a year, my schedule changes and I end up down at the Stepping Stones on Saturday nights in Philadelphia. So, full disclosure, and I'm a big believer, one of the things that used to annoy me early on in my recovery and previous to getting sober and sitting in AA, I don't know how else to say this other than like I used to really get annoyed by those like people that just rainbows and unicorns and like everything is wonderful. And you know, I took the 12 steps and I'm floating on water. That has not been my experience, as you guys are going to find out here in the not too distant future. But I do feel like it's incumbent upon me when I get asked to do this to be as honest as I can. And if I'm completely honest, I know I need to be a better member of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's always things that I could be doing better. That whole home group thing is one of them. I always feel like I slide in at 25 after 7. I slide out at 8:35. So just want to be as honest as I can. I'm not from here originally. I'm not from Philadelphia originally. I was born and raised right outside of Ocean City, New Jersey, in a town called Linwood. Mother and father loved each other very much. No tragic or traumatic things that I can share with you guys as to something I could hang my hat on as the reason that I ended up an alcoholic. I didn't have a creepy uncle. There was nothing of any substance happened to me as a kid. I had a really good upbringing. Parents taught me a lot about the values that we need to have in life, and I just turned out differently. People far more eloquent than me have stood at this very podium and a lot of podiums that I've been at, and they've found these really eloquent ways of describing the way they were pre-first drink. You hear it all the time, and people talk about the hole in the soul, or I don't remember who the speaker was, but he said he always felt like he always innately knew that he was on the wrong planet, and like eventually somebody was going to pull up in like a spaceship and take him to where he really belonged. I don't really have any of that. The best way that I can explain it to you is I just never felt right. I never felt like I belonged. I never felt like I fit in. I was always comparing myself to everybody that I met. And this was at a really, really young age, like in school, in grade school. First grade, second grade, third grade. I would be on my way to school having like panic attacks about like recess that day and who I was going to see and what I was going to say and what they were going to say, and just never measured up in any way in my life. And it's going to be controversial. I know we have a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it describes certain kinds of alcoholics. It talks about the manic depressive type, of which a whole chapter could be written. It talks about the over remorseful type. It's always going on the wagon for keeps, and it describes different kinds of alcoholics. I believe, just my belief, that there was a certain kind of alcoholic that was not mentioned in the big book. And for lack of a better way of describing that type of alcoholic, I'm going to refer to him or her as the George Costanza alcoholic. Or if you will, the neurotic class, because that's what I brought to my first drink of alcohol, was a neurotic obsession with myself. Constantly, and I would sit up at night, I don't know if anybody else ever did this, but I would plan interactions at night. Like I would think about the next day at school, and I would think, I'm going to see them in class, and then they're going to say this, and I would plan this whole conversation out in my head. And of course, I don't know if anybody, but like in my head, I always end up the big shot, and they always are ashamed of themselves. That's how it always plays out, right? So then the next day comes, I run into this person in class. They say something that wasn't part of my plan, like I had a whole script. Well, these guys didn't follow the script. So they would say something I didn't have a plan for. I would say something that made absolutely no sense in the context of that conversation. And then I would walk away. Now, for anybody that's new and you haven't heard about this, let me let you in on a little secret that we have here at Alcoholics Anonymous. That secret is something called the committee. The committee is all them voices in your head that talk to you all day long, every day. The problem is when you're 6 years old, you don't know about the committee. You just know that you're being told certain things. So after this interaction, I would be walking away and my head would just be chewing me up. Why did you say this? You should have said that. And I mean, I'll be honest, I'm married. It's still true in my life today. I never win arguments. But I always think to myself, like I always think of what I should have said in the argument, like an hour later. It never really comes to me at the right time. The point I'm trying to make is, that's what I brought to my first drink. Just a constant barraging of myself. Never measuring up, never fitting in, never belonging. Everything that I said or any social interaction that I had was so measured, because I was consumed with myself. So there's one day, and I was really young. I was like 7 or 8 years old. I lived down on right off the Barrier Islands. So, and I know a lot of people in Philly always say, oh, we're going down the shore for vacation. Well, I live down the shore, and there is nothing to do. There's really nothing going on. You're either drinking in the woods or you're drinking on the docks. Like, that's pretty much how things went. And this one particular day, some older kids were all getting together on Seaview Dock, which is not far from my house. I decide I'm going to head over there. I go over there early. Side note, unrelated to my alcoholism, I committed my first crime that day. I robbed a commercial crab trap that was like hanging off the dock. Totally unrelated. I don't even know why I just said that. But I watched these kids, and everybody was there. People started showing up with coolers, and everybody's popping beers, and now this is what I noticed. There were kids that were pretending to drink, but they weren't really drinking. They were like, yucking it up with somebody, and then as soon as they turned their back, they would pour the beer out, and then they would say, "Oh, I'm so wasted." Something clicked inside of me because I thought to myself, these guys are pretending to do this. Something's up. Like, there's got to be something to that. If they're not even doing it, they're pretending to do it. Something's got to be there. So my first drink of alcohol was 4 Rolling Rock Pony bottles. If we have any mathematicians in the room, that's 4 times 7, that's 28 ounces, basically 2 beers. It completely changed my life. Something I've learned over the years in Alcoholics Anonymous, when I listen to someone's story and I listen to people talk, and you get familiar with the 12 steps, it's pretty amazing how the 12th step, where it says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I almost feel like that first drink was somewhat of a spiritual awakening for me. It really changed everything about what was happening in my life. I no longer worried about what I was saying. I just said it. And not only did I just say it, I kind of knew that you were digging what I was saying. It gave me a little confidence. It gave me a little oomph in what I was saying. And like, for lack of better words, it leveled the playing field. Because like my whole life, I felt like I was always playing from behind. I was always like catching up, or trying to catch up, or trying to fit in, or always in my head, always thinking, always measuring, always examining, always coming up with thoughts, and this isn't right, and I got to do this. All of that was gone. It was like calmness and stillness. That's what makes me an alcoholic. Now, I have a pretty tragic story that I could probably stand up here and tell you guys for the next 7 hours about a horrifying experience. Living homeless on the streets of Philly and yada, 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 not bathing for years at a time, having dreadlocks that I didn't want, smelling like a goat. I can give you all them stories, and if I'm honest about it, some of them are really funny. But at the end of the day, I spent a lot of years in Alcoholics Anonymous thinking that my horrible story is what made me an alcoholic. And it's not true. Those are the things that happened to me as a result of my alcoholism. What makes me an alcoholic is what alcohol did for me that day on that dock when I was 7 years old. It changed the landscape of my life. Really, really important to kind of hammer that point home. I can't stress that enough. There was no experimenting for me. I wasn't like a weekend warrior. I found something that worked. Probably within a week, I was going to school with booze on me. And it was weird. It was like a weird time. I don't know if anybody remembers high school, but it was like, there was like weird trends that would evolve in the high school. And one of the trends that was going on at the time was people would come to school with drinks with their lunch wrapped in tinfoil. So you never knew what they were drinking, which worked out perfectly for me. So I was drinking throughout the day, almost immediately. Got out of middle school, went to high school. It's a whole new ball game. So I get to high school and I'm like, I got to see the lay of the land. I got to see what's doing here, see who's who. I'm seeing all the crowds, all the different people. And I noticed it was just one group of people. And they were like, I don't even know how to explain it other than like, you could tell that everybody else in the school respected them. Like when they walked up the hallway, it was like people would like get out of their way. And I was like watching that because I started thinking to myself, I would like that for myself. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? I want respect from people. I want people to look up to me. So I think to myself, I'm going to do what they're doing, and then I'll get that same respect for myself. So in the interest of the traditions, I will just simply say these guys were selling non-AA conference-approved substances in the school, and I decided I'm going to do that too, because I want that same respect for myself. And the end result of that was, about a year later, see, there's something about that lifestyle like that thug thing where you're like a tough guy. You have to like, I think the kids today, they say you got to be about that life. And the truth of the matter is, I was not about that life. When it came right down to it, I was not a good businessman. I was doing all of this stuff because I wanted you to know that I was that guy. I wanted you to think that I was that guy. So this was like 1988. So part of like that lifestyle and the way that I wanted to prove to you that I was that guy was I got a cell phone. Now, cell phones looked drastically different back then than they do today. A cell phone back then weighed about 6 pounds. It took 2 days to charge it. It had this, and I used it as often as I could. And if I'm honest, most of the time when I looked like I was using it, I probably wasn't really using it. I just wanted you to think I was using it. And those of you that know me pretty well know I have social anxiety. So sometimes you'll see me outside of a meeting. If it's a really big meeting, you'll see me in a crowd of people. And all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, hold on, I got to take a call. Probably not really a call. It's just a way for me to get out of there, right? In my mind, I want you guys to think I'm that guy. Here's what I really look like. I look like I was calling in troop reinforcements on an airstrike in Vietnam because I looked like an idiot on this thing. But I also drew attention to myself. And Good Friday of 1989, I was sitting at my house with my father, and there was a knock at the door. And I went to answer the door, and it was this girl that I had met at school that week. I met her on like that Wednesday. It was like we got off for that whole weekend because it was Easter Sunday, and it was a short day at school, and we met. And so I see her in the window, and I'm thinking to myself, she wants me. That's why she's here. Now, I failed to notice the 3 police officers that were standing behind her. Here it turns out she was an undercover officer and witnessed me engaged in some nefarious activities. And basically, long story short, I lived in a tiny, small town. They blocked my street off. They had cop cars on my lawn. They pulled me out of the house like I was Pablo Escobar. And the truth is, I was like a 14-year-old just trying to fit in. Now, here's the thing. I ended up sentenced to juvenile life as a result of that incident. That would be what we call a proverbial red flag. Like a normal kid gets involved in something like that, gets arrested, gets taken to jail, gets sentenced to juvenile life, something would click inside of him that says, you might be on the wrong track. Things might be a little off. That, it was not even a blip on the radar screen for me. I ended up in a place called Jamesburg over in New Jersey. And I want to share this brief story because it kind of like is an epitome of how I am as an alcoholic. I get there, it's my first day, and I think I just had my 15th birthday by the time I ended up getting sentenced and went in there. And they weigh you almost like you're cattle. Like they put you through this whole thing, you got to get deliced, they strip you down naked, they check you out without going into any gory details. They check you out really good. Then they put you on the scale. And I remember saying to the guard as they put me on a scale, and it was like 84 pounds or whatever, like I was tiny. I said, why do you weigh us? And he goes, that's how we house you. We house you based on what you weigh. And what I didn't realize was it's their way of at least giving you a fighting chance of getting through this. This place had, they called them bungalows, and they would weigh you, and you would get housed in a bungalow based on what you weighed. Again, a normal kid would be like, oh my God, I can't even believe that I'm here. Within 3 days of getting there, I was living like I was meant to be there. Figured out law library stuff. I started to realize that a bunch of these kids that were in here probably don't even know that they probably have a way to get out of here, and they don't even know it. Start write letters to my judge. I would write them every week. Started making those phone calls to my family that I would get really familiar with later on, those promises that I'm making to my family that I already know I'm not going to keep. I just kind of got into this role. And, they have that saying about the Marines. They say improvise, adapt, and overcome. That's what Marines do. And when I look back at my alcoholism and the way that I lived my life, it's very similar to the way that we lived. Things would just continue to cascade downward in my life. And no matter how bad it got, I would internally justify it and then live my life like it was okay. The big book talks about the abnormal becomes normal. That was my first experience with an abnormal event in my life. And in a very short period of time, I made it completely normal. Like every kid gets sentenced to juvenile life. So as I said, I was writing my judge letters, and one day they woke me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and said, "You got to go to court. You're doing court today." And I'm like, "Oh, I was already sentenced. What am I going to court for?" So I guess when I got down to court, and the judge's name was Judge Harvey Winkelstein, never forget it. He said, "Son, I've been reading your letters," and I learned later that he wasn't reading the letters. One of his clerks was and got his attention. Like he didn't open every letter that was ever sent to him. But he said, "I was reading your letters," and he said, "I did some research. When I sentenced you, I had to make a decision whether I was going to count your juvenile life from 18 or 21. I determined it was 18. As you stand before me today, you're about a month before your 17th birthday. I'm going to commute the remainder of your sentence, and you can finish that time until your 18th birthday in a long-term treatment center." That afternoon, they took me back to Jamesburg. After court, I had to go all the way down to Mays Landing. They took me back to Jamesburg and put me on a bus to Philadelphia. And I was told I was going to a place called The Bridge, which was on 8400 Pine Road. And I still remember the day, like getting off the bus, walking down Rollin Street, and there's like Pine Street, and there's like this house, and it's like down a hill. You turn in the driveway, and it goes down this hill, and there's like a little circle there. And I remember walking down that hill. I had no idea what I was, like I couldn't, it was like all blur. Like I couldn't, that morning, in the span of 8 hours, everything changed. And I get to this treatment center, and you gotta love the treatment centers. Because I get there, and it was like a mess up. Like they were like, "Oh man, we don't have a bed for you until Tuesday." And I'm like, "All right, well, it's Thursday." So that's like 4 days. So they're like, "Well, you just have to come back on Tuesday morning." Now, as luck would have it, and you may not tell by the way I'm dressed tonight, I absolutely love, and still do, the Grateful Dead. It just so happened that the Grateful Dead was playing a 4-night set at the Philadelphia Spectrum that very weekend. How convenient was that? Can't really tell you much of what happened between that Thursday and that Tuesday. We use the term in AA a lot, blackout, which is like when you completely forget everything. I don't want to refer to it as a blackout in this particular case, but I'll call it a brownout because I remember certain things. But this is what I can tell you. When I came out of it, and it was like one of them situations, and I'm pretty certain there's people in this room that have been in this situation. You know when you're coming out of a blackout, and you have that moment of like, you have to do that quick assessment on yourself, like, all right, where am I? So this is what I saw. I saw a bunch of old guys, a bunch of gray-haired guys, people smoking cigarettes in one hand, styrofoam cups in another. And they're smoking and drinking coffee and laughing. And the next thing I know, and I'm like, it's just like, I'm here, and then all of a sudden, boom, there I am. And I'm looking around, and it's all these guys, and then this door flies open. Somebody goes, "Let's go, guys, the meeting's starting." It's my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was at a place called Life or Death at Torresdale on Blakiston Street in Philadelphia. I have no clue to this day how I got there. The last memory that I had, and this will be my only reference, and I meditated for 10 minutes about not cursing from the podium and not bringing up things that are outside of the traditions. This will be the only time I do that. The last recollection I had was running through the Richard Allen projects with 3 other hippies carrying a nitrous tank. It's the last thing I remember. And when I came to, I was standing outside of Life or Death. And I just, all right, meeting. All right. I had no clue what was happening. I go into this meeting, I sit down. The guy speaking, his name was Vietnam Ron. It was my first introduction to AA with the whole nickname thing. Now, here's the interesting thing. That meeting, for anyone that's been there, or it's not there anymore, they moved. But for years, that meeting was situated on top of a gun range. There was like a gun store on the first floor. Nobody felt it necessary to share this vital piece of information with the new guy. So I'm like in there, like, where the hell am I? There's like gunshots going off. I'm like, oh my God. There was a guy behind the coffee bar, and I later found out that he lived in a retirement home. I mean, the guy had to be 107. He was talking about Tommy guns and prohibition. He had like a propeller hat. His name was Herb. And I also learned a little bit. I had my first AA resentment at that meeting because I met this guy. And I want to share this because I think it's critically important. It had been raining outside. I was wet. I came inside, and I don't know if this is like AA protocol, but it was absolutely frigid in that clubhouse. I mean, it had to be like 40 degrees. I know it's probably not the case, but in my mind's eye, I can literally see the guy across from me having like icicles in his mustache. Like, that's how cold it felt in this room. And I was shaking just from shivering and being cold. And this guy, his name was Bud the Handyman, very well-known AA guy, another nickname guy. He brought me my first cup of coffee in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he brought it to me, and it was only half full. And I realized something later. He brought it to me half full so that I wouldn't spill it on myself. Like, he had enough wherewithal to see the condition that I was in to be able to do that. Just think that's so neat, and I think it's very appropriate to share. Like, that is what we can do for each other. My mother loved me more than anybody else on the planet. I don't think she would have thought enough about my condition to do that. But he did. And in perfect AA fashion, I resented him. But not for that. I got to share this because it still kind of irritates me even though he passed away. So I learned something after, the meeting and talking to people. Bud, his name was Bud R. Bud hit the lottery 2 times. 2 times. Now, I don't know if that pisses anybody else off as much as it does me. I can't even hit a $5 scratch off. And this dude hit the lottery twice. And in my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had already figured out and was convinced that he was probably not putting any money in the basket. So I was a pretty good member of AA before I even got here, is basically what I'm trying to say. That was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The next day I ended up in that treatment center, The Bridge, which was about a mile from that meeting. And the remainder of my talk tonight, that was my first introduction to AA. And I want to be really clear about this. I'd love to tell you that at that first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, the heavens opened, the angels sang, I heard the message of Alcoholics Anonymous loud and clear. I was rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence of which I had not even dreamed, and I haven't had a drink since. It's not my experience. But I want to share with you guys 2 separate experiences that I've had in Alcoholics Anonymous, and then hopefully be able to kind of convey to you what has made the difference in my life in this current time that I have in Alcoholics Anonymous. So in that treatment center, it was very kind of implied as you went through the program, and it was a therapeutic community, so it was very structured. You went through this phase, then you got to this phase. I remember they used to give us like cheap, like you couldn't buy your own cigarettes for like the first 6 months you were there. You would get these Cambridge cigarettes. But after you got to re-entry, which is when you could start going to outside meetings and go back out into the world, then you could start getting your own cigarettes. And I remember perfect fashion of like how we get consumed with ourselves, feeling like I was like, you know, like the paparazzi was going to be following me because now I'm outside having a Marlboro. I'm really feeling like I'm better than everybody else. So during that time, you had to make these really elaborate weekend plans to go home and to do things. And I had to have certain meetings that I was going to. And I ended up, my parents lived in Linwood, so when I would go home, I found a clubhouse in Marmora, New Jersey called the Stagecoach Group. It's still there. I love them, but I want to share this experience. And I hope in sharing this, please know I'm not here to be critical of anybody. This is not to be, it's just to share my personal experience. I got really involved in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, to the point that like, I was doing 2-3 meetings a day. I was hanging out at the diner. I was going to sober softball. I was going to dances. I was doing it all. Never had a sponsor. If I ended up at a big book meeting, it was purely by accident. And if I was at a big book meeting, you can rest assured that I would focus my comments on certain things out of the big book. Like alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And the hideous 4 horsemen of terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. My home group had like slogans. And they even had like hand gestures to go with the slogans. And God love them for it. But they would literally, the old timers would sit in the back of the room and they would go, we don't take one drink. And they would take their hand and put it over their fist. And they would say, we don't take one drink for one day. And we don't get drunk. And if you can do that, you're a winner. Now let me tell you something. Early on, I could rock with that. But I want to hearken you guys back to my talk when I talked about the way that I was when I was 7 years old. Because all of that was back. And what happened for me, and it doesn't have to happen to anybody else in this room, that run that I had in Alcoholics Anonymous, I stayed sober for almost 4 years. 3 years and about 10 and a half months, 9 months, somewhere in there. When I picked up a drink of alcohol, I was crazier than I was when I got here. My alcoholism, and again, this is my experience, my alcoholism is not treated by me not drinking. If anything, that is one of the things that brings it to the surface. Now, how did it show up in my life? Well, I lived in a small town. I'll just paint a picture for you. So there's only so many members of Alcoholics Anonymous in small towns, right? And there's only so many meetings that you can go to. So what I was doing was I was going to all these meetings, going to my home group, and we had a lot of people there, and there would be stragglers, people visiting because it was in Marmora and they would come over from Sea Isle and Ocean City. But like for the most part, it was always the same people. And I would go a period of time and then I would start going off. Like I just started going sideways in my head. And I'd start getting restless, just a little irritated. The meeting of the people talking. And like, you know, you go in, it's like the same lady would raise her hand. She had her hand up, and I saw her at the meeting on Tuesday, and I'm just in my head, I'm like, oh, here we go. She's gonna talk about a 12-year-old and the Adderall medication, and she doesn't want her on the and she's gonna go through this whole thing, and then a bunch of people are gonna give her feedback that she didn't take the last time, but they're gonna give it to her again. And then there's the other guy. I'm checking it out to see if there's any. I don't think we have anyone like this in the room tonight, so I feel better. The other guy is the guy that says the same thing, almost verbatim, every time he talks. This guy would, drive me nuts. And I would be sitting in a meeting like, all right, I got to do something. This is like, in my head, I would get in my car and I would go, I know they didn't start this whole AA thing. You're not supposed to leave the meeting worse than when you got there. But that's what was happening to me. Because I'm going and I'm looking at, oh, this guy again, he's going to, say his whole spiel. So it's the only prayer that I said during that run in Alcoholics Anonymous. I call it the untreated alcoholic prayer. And it basically goes like this. You sit down in that meeting and you sit across from that guy, and the prayer is, God, please don't let him raise his hand. Like, that was the extent of my relationship with God. It was non-existent. On a personal level, I was doing really good externally in that time. I was a little hippie kid. I had dreadlocks. Somebody taught me how to tie-dye T-shirts. In the late 80s, early 90s, tie-dye T-shirts were like a huge thing. I lived right near the boardwalk, which is a huge tourist trap. I could make a T-shirt for like $1.40 and sell it on the boardwalk for almost $40. I made a ton of money. I had a drawer that was literally packed with money. I had a bank account that had commas in it. I was young. I was doing really good. I got an apartment on the beach. I could flick a cigarette in the ocean off my deck. And this was in 1992. My apartment cost $1,800 a month. And I would pay that in cash, and I would slam the bills on the table because I got a rush off it. I failed to mention this, and I want to back up for a second. I think for a lot of years of my life, I didn't think it was possible to go to rehab and not have a relationship. So I'd met this girl. She was this Sunoco cashier. When I started being able to go up and get cigarettes, she was the cashier at the Sunoco. We became romantically involved, which really was just making out by the dumpster behind the Sunoco, because I was in a rehab up the street. But we had become involved, and now we were together, and I had a hostage. She moved down to the shore with me. I couldn't be faithful. It's just like anything in this world that I'm using to fix me. They all have time limits. They only work for a certain period of time. It's like I would get a new car. And when you first get a new car and it's got that smell, that new car smell, and it's still got that, the footprint thing. You know what I'm talking about? Those papers that are on the floor with the footprints on them. You're like, man, this works. Then like 3 weeks later, I'm coming down the steps, I'm going to get in a car, and I might notice a little paint chip on the back bumper. Within a week, I'm like, I got to get rid of this car because now it's not working. Relationships were the same way. If I'm with her, I want to be with her sister. Just nothing was satisfying me. And my whole life kind of unraveled in the span of like 4 months. I wasn't faithful. I got caught cheating. She left. I was not a good businessman. I was a kid. I didn't know anything about mercantile licenses, tax ID numbers, all that stuff. My business kind of like went south really quick. I was making a ton of money. The guy that I was renting from just slowly started increasing my rent until basically he was extorting me. I was like, all the money I was making was going right to him because I didn't have a contract. I didn't have anything in place. And he knew he could do it to me because he knew that I didn't have all those licenses and stuff that I needed. So my business went south. My mom died. And it sounds funny, but Jerry Garcia died. Might not sound like a big deal to anybody else, but that was like my whole life at the time. And I had already pulled away from AA. And I want to say this because, we hear these things at Alcoholics Anonymous. It's probably one of the most profound things I ever heard. It was at an Acts of Recovery in Barnegat, New Jersey, in about 2010, maybe 2009. This gentleman, Billy N., was speaking, and he said, we often talk about, you go to meetings and everybody's like, who's in their first 30 days? And then everybody attacks that person. Like we're always looking for the person in their first 30 days. And the point that he was making, and I'm really not good at quoting people, so I might be screwing it up, but he said, I think we're looking for the wrong person. We should be looking for the person in Alcoholics Anonymous that's in his last 30 days. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, as somebody that was that guy, that when you're the person in his last 30 days, you don't know that you're that person. You have no idea. I probably was leaving AA for about a year before I left, a year before I picked up a drink. And it began over all those things that I talked about earlier. I was just consumed with the fellowship. It's my belief today that Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship, is designed to go in conjunction with a program. Because if you do not have a program to function in Alcoholics Anonymous, you will end up in a mental institution. That's just my experience. So all those things happened. I'm sitting on the end of my bed, and I thought, you know what, Dave? Might as well go out and have a drink. And the next thought I had after that was, if you go out and have a drink, you're going to lose everything you have. And I'm here tonight to tell you guys that I played the tape. I remembered where I came from. I knew exactly what alcohol was going to do to me. And I drank anyway. I've learned something in those 9 years after that. Because basically what happened was I picked up a drink, and I ended up homeless on the streets of Philly for the next 9 years of my life. I was addicted to a non-AA conference-approved substance. Alcohol was there right along the way. And I became everything in this world I never thought I would become. And I did everything and then some that I never thought I would do. And the last 9 years of my active drinking was spent pretty much every day on Roosevelt Boulevard. Anywhere, like, got to share this if there's anybody that's into panhandling. The farther north you go, the better money you'll make. So I started out down by Friends Hospital at like Summerdale on the Boulevard, but like the big money maker was up the I-95 ramp on Street Road, like up in Bensalem. That was my life, up and down the Boulevard for 9 years. And I could talk, like I said earlier, for hours about that period of my life. And there was a large chunk of my time in Alcoholics Anonymous where I focused on that time of my life. I don't think there's words I can give you all to describe the feeling of 1:30 a.m., Kensington and Somerset. It's pouring down rain, and you're walking to nowhere. Like you have nowhere to go. And you're just walking. And even if I did have somewhere to go, the people there were not too happy about me being there. Life was not fun. April 23rd of 2004, I was living in a tent, and I don't want to romanticize it. Somebody had given me a tent on the boulevard, and they came with all the bells and whistles, you know, with the stakes and the tarp, and I was not an outdoorsman. I got a stick, and I just opened the tent up, laid it on the ground, put the stick in the middle, and it was just enough for me to climb in. That's all I needed. I was just not part of the human race, for lack of better words. I was like a troll under a bridge. Like I was completely, I probably hadn't bathed in a long time. And, you know, I often tell this story and I make a joke about it, but I'm not really feeling the joke tonight. I just want to tell you, like, my life was not good. A park ranger pulled up because they were cleaning out the soccer field next to Self-Help and said, what's your name? And I gave him a fake name because that's what I do. I stopped carrying an ID about 10 years before that. And he went back into his dune buggy, and I guess he had some kind of supercomputer in there because he was able to kind of connect all the dots. He had every alias I ever used, including my personal favorite, which was Pete Moss. That's one I gave in the woods when I was a teenager. He had every alias, and he said, put your hands behind your back. Now listen, Ron could have been there that night. and said, and kind of came up, now he put me in the back of this dune buggy that had like plexiglass on it. It was like, it's pretty humiliating for a guy like me who thinks he's like a mastermind criminal. I get locked up by a park ranger. But Ron could have been sitting there and said to me, Dave, let me tell you what's about to happen. They're gonna take you off to jail. You're gonna do a couple months in jail. You're gonna get out of jail in a couple months. You're gonna end up in a Spanish recovery house in Germantown. And you're gonna meet this guy, Chris. It's gonna turn out to be your first Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor. He's gonna walk you through the 12 steps as they're outlined in the big book. You're gonna have this profound spiritual experience. Your entire life and the way that you react to your life is gonna change. You're going to end up going back to college, getting a bunch of degrees, owing the government a ton of money. Of course, Ron had to throw that in. You're going to get your driver's license back. You're going to meet a girl. You're going to have 2 kids. You're going to buy a house in Warrington, Pennsylvania. And on one Saturday night, you're going to put a suit jacket on and drive over to a church that's near your house and tell a bunch of people about what just happened to you. I would have asked Ron for a shot of whatever it was that he was drinking, because that is not happening to me. The one thing that I want to mention to you guys is that throughout that 9 years, I had trickled in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous throughout that time. In and out of recovery houses, in and out of different clubhouses in the city, and I could never get it together. Like my perception of a good meeting, and I learned this in the shelter system in Philadelphia, there was a period of there was 9 years where like I had a meeting list that had all the good meetings marked. And they weren't, the only reason that they were identified by me and my buddies in the shelter was these were the meetings that had food at them. So we would have them all marked off, like this one's got the croissants and this, and we would roll in thick. And I know that the home group was like, oh, these guys again, putting croissants in my book bag and whatnot. But they took me off to jail, and I had an experience in a jail. And the only thing I can do is share with you guys what happened to me. I was put in my own cell, and it wasn't like my own cell because, like in my mind, I was in my own cell because I run the jail. But the truth of the matter is they put me in there because if they put me with anybody else, they would have beat the living crap out of me. Because when they showered me on State Road, the shirt that I was wearing was literally stuck to my back. Like it fell apart when I went to take it off. So they put me in my own cell, and while I was laying in that cell, I just had a moment. And in that moment, it was just like everything got still, and I heard a voice that said, Dave, the fight is over. I can report, and I just took a moment in my head, I can report to you guys with absolute confidence that from that day until this one, and that was almost 19 years ago, I haven't even remotely considered going back to living the way that I used to live. And I also know that that was several months before I ever met my Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor. So I know a fundamental truth, that I had absolutely nothing to do with that beautiful, beautiful gift that was just like bestowed upon me. I never stopped thinking about drinking, ever. It was constantly on my mind. And for whatever reason, on that day, now did that render me magically sane? Absolutely not. But I just got blessed. When I got out, I got out of jail, and I could tell these crazy, like, second and inches stories about how so many things had to happen for, like, the dots to get connected for me. But I end up in a meeting on a Wednesday night at Cahawk's Playground, and I heard this guy, and I heard the message of Alcoholics Anonymous like I had never heard it before. And these guys were just a bunch of men and women sitting around tables in a community room at a rec center in Philadelphia, reading out of the big book. And these were like grown men sitting in like kindergarten chairs. And there was like signs around the room. It was like bully-free zone, positive thinking area. And these guys were reading through the book a couple sentences at a time and talking about it. And I heard the message of Alcoholics Anonymous loud and clear, and it was God, dependency, and service to others. Now, what I've learned in the years since is that I had Alcoholics Anonymous backwards my first time here. I thought that Alcoholics Anonymous, and I heard it correctly, but I don't mean this to sound like people in rehabs didn't mean to say it, but they would say, you go to AA when you get out of here and you talk about your problems. So I had this belief that that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go to AA and talk about our problems. What I've learned in this time is that Alcoholics Anonymous is a place for me to get out of my problems by seeing who I can be helpful to here. It sounds like a subtle shift, but it totally transformed my life. I'll just end by saying this. My experience in Alcoholics Anonymous has been many and varied. It's been all over the map. There was a period of my sobriety where, I kind of got full of myself. And I think it's important to share these kind of things from a podium, and I try to share them as often as I can. But around from 2009 till 2012, I did a lot of traveling, spoke at conferences, put up in hotels, all that good stuff, right? And I forgot a simple fundamental truth. And here's my truth. Some of the best members of Alcoholics Anonymous that I know are terrible, terrible speakers. Some of the worst members of Alcoholics Anonymous that I know, with some of the most horrendous character defects that harm the most people, are the best speakers in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a profound experience. I do got to be honest, it was one of the biggest honors of my life was to share a podium with Sandy Beach in Tampa, Florida. But getting there, I melted down on a Southwest Airlines ticket person because she didn't know who I was. That my flight couldn't be delayed because I had to speak at this conference. And that night, as I was laying in that hotel room, and I knew that the words that were coming out of my mouth didn't match what was in my heart, I knew that I had to do something. I knew that I had to kind of change up what I was doing. And as God has repeatedly done in my life, He put somebody in my life. I was telling Ron this story before the meeting. The gentleman that God put in my life at that time was a gentleman named Vance. He passed away about a year ago. Small, frail, older African-American gentleman. Me and him we were so far opposite of each other, you would not believe it. But some of the greatest times of my recovery and my sobriety, one of the best times was taking a bus trip to Founders Day with a bunch of his home group members from the 12 and 12 group at 28th and Cambria, which it's a bunch of people that are sober 50 years, and me and a couple of my goofball friends on this bus trip. Set me free, showed me man, I can be part of this. And he was able to show me, because at that point in my life, I had just had a son, my life was getting full. I started to realize that Alcoholics Anonymous was going to take on a different form for me, because kids tend to do that. Change the way that I can't do fifth steps 3 times a week. I can't be bringing all these crazy new guys to my house with a newborn. And Vance was put in my path to show me how to put steps 10, 11, and 12 in practice in my life on a daily basis. If you're new, please get with somebody, probably somebody that you kind of don't like, and ask them for help. If you hear them talk at meetings and in your head you're going, that guy's probably full of shit, that's probably the person you want to ask to help you. I want to thank Ron for asking me to do this. And as soon as I sit down, I'm going to get a Phillies update on my phone. Thanks for letting me share.
Let's thank Dave one more time. Yeah, a quick backstory. Our scheduled speaker, we had Bill Borchard scheduled for tonight out of Connecticut, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was the writer, producer, director of My Name's Bill W. and 1,000 Years of Sobriety, and the Lois Wilson story, and it goes on and on and on. And he passed away last Saturday, and we were calling around for such a valuable member of Alcoholics Anonymous, all he did. And we're struggling to grab a speaker last minute, and Dave comes through for us. So thank you again, Dave, that you're a lifesaver. Your story's powerful as usual. Wouldn't expect any. We all have great stories in here. This is important. We have an ongoing commitment every Sunday night at 7 p.m. in Quakertown at the treatment center. If you'd like to go, there's no time commitment or nothing like that. Speak 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. And you carry that message behind, at the treatment. There's nothing more touched my soul than going there and being of service on the front lines. So get involved with that. See us after the meeting. We got a nice way of closing. Don't forget the meeting after the meeting. And it's customary for us to form a line and thank our speakers formally. They come here at their own time and expense. So if you care to join us, we'll start with a moment of silence followed by the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Keep coming back.